She has what to hide. A small company working from home? I want half. Ethan's voice echoed in the courtroom, confident, lazy, not even bothering to conceal his contempt. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting the collar of his expensive suit, his eyes raised as if victory was already his. I sat one table away from him, saying nothing. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew, in a few minutes he would wish for the same silence I was keeping now. The judge, a woman with neatly tied silver hair, bent over the file and pushed her glasses up. She looked directly at Ethan. According to the financial report, Blue Horizon Media is currently valued at $4,200,000. In addition, Bethany Wells owns real estate worth more than $3 million, along with personal and retirement investments amounting to $1,800,000. The room fell into an odd silence. Ethan froze. His face turned pale, his hand trembling on the hard wooden table. I stayed quiet, because I had prepared for this moment years ago, when he first called my work a cute project. When he never once asked what I was doing with those sleepless nights. When he chose to dismiss instead of listen. That very indifference had saved me. I once heard someone say, if you want to know how strong a person is, look at how they were raised. If that's true, then all the strength in me must have come from an old grocery store at the end of a dirt road on the outskirts of Toledo, Ohio. I was born and raised there. In a small house with gray shingles, a fireplace crackling every winter, and the sound of my mother moving around the kitchen before dawn. My father was a mechanic at a farm equipment shop. His hands were always stained with grease, his back bent earlier than his years. He didn't speak much, but whenever I stayed beside him as he patched pipes, replaced spark plugs, or checked an old bike tire, he patiently showed me how to use each wrench, how to hear the machine breathe, to know what was wrong. Back then I didn't think much of it. But later, running my own company, I realized. From my father I learned precision, patience, and not being afraid to get my hands dirty. My mother was different. She didn't need bolts or machines. She needed ledgers, receipts, and a pair of hands that never rested. She managed the small grocery behind our house, a place that sold milk, bread, sanitary pads, and lighters. Calling it a store made it sound big, but really it was one old room with the smell of paper and coffee mixing with morning floor cleaner. I started helping her when I was 8. My first job was stacking candy on shelves and wiping glass counters. On busy days I stood behind the register tapping the calculator, adding up every coin. Mom always made me record everything carefully in the ledger, cross-checking cash at the end of the day. If we were off by even 5 cents, she made me find it. Not because of the money, you understand, she said, her voice stern yet gentle. But because one day you'll do big work, and people who do big work can't afford to be careless. I nodded, though back then I couldn't imagine what big work meant. We weren't wealthy. Every month, there were moments we had to choose between paying the electric bill or changing a tire. But we got by. More importantly, my mother never once let me see her despair. She had a way of doing everything with her hands, from baking bread to mending clothes, as if the world could split in two and she would still stand tall. I grew up in that struggle, but I never felt ashamed. At school I studied hard. I wasn't the top student, but I always turned in assignments on time, kept full notes, and volunteered for any extra work teachers allowed. I didn't have many close friends, but I had goals. At 13 I started babysitting for neighbors on weekends. At 15 I worked morning shifts at a bakery near school, starting at 6 a.m. before classes. At 17 I split my time between classes, a bookstore job, and helping at Mom's shop. The money I earned I divided into 3 parts. One for Mom, one for my college fund jar, and the rest in an old drawer, for books or when shoes could no longer be patched. Every dollar I earned was a brick for a dream, even if I didn't yet know what shape that dream would take. I only knew one thing: I wanted different. Not to abandon where I came from, but so I could return without bowing my head. When I applied to college, Mom quietly placed her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Never let anyone tell you you're undeserving because you didn't start with everything." I carried those words all through my life. And in that courtroom this morning, when they read aloud every dollar amount Ethan had never cared to ask about, I thought of her. She never knew about startups, investments, or company valuations. But she knew the most important thing: that some values must be built quietly every day with your own hands, and when needed, they become a foundation unshakable by anyone. I was admitted to the University of Michigan with a partial scholarship, Majoring in business. Marketing. The day I got the acceptance letter, I was alone in the backyard, the letter on my lap, the wind flipping the pages so lightly it felt unreal. My mother didn't cry, but when she walked over, her eyes were red. She only said, "Don't forget where you started. But don't let it be the limit of where you can go." I kept that sentence as a silent promise. College years were filled with crammed schedules and almost stubborn determination. Mornings I went to class. Afternoons I worked at the library. Evenings I tutored underclassmen, then studied in my dorm by lamplight, surrounded by the sound of keyboards and sighs from roommates. I had no time for parties, no chance to dress up like other girls. But I had quiet nights at my desk, first paychecks, and brief nods of approval from professors when I delivered polished projects. I graduated on time with honors. And then I left Michigan one early summer day. Chicago welcomed me with the smell of concrete and bitter coffee. The city was stunning in a way that overwhelmed you. Skyscrapers casting shadows on stone sidewalks, sharply dressed people moving as if chased by time. In the loop, I found myself clutching my fabric folder of resumes, heart pounding, unsure whether to walk straight or turn left. Who am I now? I thought. And who will I become? I rented a tiny apartment on the west side, tiny in every sense. The living room doubled as the bedroom, the kitchen shared a wall with the hallway, and the bathroom had no towel rack. But I had a window facing an old maple tree and a desk wide enough for a computer, a notebook, and a morning cup of coffee. To me, that was enough. My first job was at Mill Carson, a mid-sized ad agency handling campaigns for local brands. I started as a market research assistant. Not glamorous, but a place where I learned to listen to data and turn dry numbers into compelling stories. I remember my first big meeting. At the edge of the table, I stayed unnoticed except for a nod from my direct boss, Rachel. She was a woman in her 40s, calm and sharp, brown hair tied low, her voice deliberate as if weighing each word. After the meeting, I gathered papers ready to leave when Rachel called me back. "Bethany, the chart you gave the team today, the one on seasonal shopping behavior, you analyzed that yourself?" I nodded, my heart racing. "Well done," she said, then smiled lightly. "Next week, try presenting it yourself." Just that simple praise carried me for months. But I didn't only work office hours. Every night, I opened my laptop and worked on what I called my secret child, a small blog analyzing marketing campaigns of major brands, where they failed, what they did right, and how consumers reacted. At first, no one read it. But I kept writing. Each post felt like a draft for tomorrow, the day I would leave the office to build something of my own. I don't know exactly when the startup idea began. Maybe one rainy night when I read market reports past 2 a.m. and asked myself, who am I doing this for? For quarterly review scores? Or for a company that doesn't know my name? Or maybe it was one autumn morning when I stepped out of the train station and saw a local cafe hanging a clumsy banner, "Reopened, 10% off." I looked at that sign and thought, who's helping people like them? Small businesses, corner cafes, tailor shops, old bookstores, they don't have the budget to hire big agencies. But they have spirit, stories, and a community worth honoring. What they lack is someone to help them tell the right story the right way. And I knew I could be that person. The idea for Blue Horizon Media was born on a late November afternoon, when sunlight slanted through the window of my tiny apartment and fell across the screen where I had typed the first line of my business plan. We don't sell ads. We build connections between brands and people, starting with the smallest things, a good cup of coffee or an honest story. I didn't know how far I would go. But for the first time in my life, I felt I was headed in the right direction. I met Ethan on a March evening, when patches of snow still lingered on Chicago sidewalks, but inside the Drake Hotel everything glowed like spring. That fundraising gala was hosted by a foundation supporting small businesses in the city. The same foundation I had once written analysis pieces about for my blog, and they invited me as a young potential guest. I came alone, wearing a deep blue dress I had altered to fit, hair tied low, makeup enough to feel confident without being showy. I remember stepping into the main hall, crystal lights reflecting on marble floors like fallen drops of sunlight. I felt out of place among the glamorous gowns, the murmuring conversations, the familiar laughter of people who all seemed to already know one another. I was about to grab a glass of water and slip into a quiet corner when he walked up. Tall, broad-shouldered, in a tailored black tuxedo with pale gray eyes like morning fog. "Sorry if I'm intruding," he said, his voice deep, confident. But I can see you're looking for an exit. Need someone to point the way. I laughed, softly but enough to turn and meet his eyes. And you're a professional tour guide at fundraisers? Not exactly. But I'm good at reading maps and people. His name was Ethan Montgomery, strategic director at a financial investment firm based in River North. Born and raised in Connecticut, studied at Dartmouth, then earned his MBA at Wharton. It sounded like he had walked straight out of one of those ideal men lists women's magazines love to publish. But what made me pause wasn't the perfect resume. It was the way he asked what I did, and then truly listened in silence. When I told him about Blue Horizon Media, about my first handful of small clients, about the sleepless nights writing proposals and tracking numbers on Google Analytics, he didn't interrupt. He didn't laugh. He didn't glance at his watch. Instead, he raised his eyebrows, rested his hand on his wine glass, and said, "You're building something real. Companies like mine, we often forget that behind every marketing campaign is a human being. You don't." I looked up at him, unable to hide my surprise. For the first time, someone didn't call my work a cute little startup. We talked the entire evening about growth models, customer data, Midwest consumer habits, and how major brands often ignored the voices of everyday people. I didn't know if it was a carefully rehearsed act or genuine empathy, but that night, I let myself believe I had met someone who understood me. In the days that followed, Ethan reached out first. Morning texts with links to articles about brands I had analyzed. A bouquet of tulips delivered to my office with a note: "Tuesdays need color." He took me to places I had never dared enter. A restaurant on the 70th floor of the Willis Tower, an intimate concert by a renowned jazz musician, closed-door conferences reserved for investors and strategy executives. "You should be in rooms like this," he said when I fumbled with my heavy coat at one seminar. "People with vision like yours, don't let yourself stay on the sidelines." I used to think love was a string of small things, long looks and caring questions. But with Ethan, love came like a wave, fast, strong, and consuming. Only 2 months later, he brought me to meet his family in Connecticut. Their home looked like it had been cut from an interior design magazine. His mother, a former executive. His father, a real estate investor. They shook my hand, polite and cold as the rim of a martini glass. As we left, I whispered, "Do you think they liked me?" Ethan smiled, kissed my forehead. "They've never liked anyone, Bethany. But you don't need them. You have me." He proposed 6 months after we first met at a boutique hotel in New York. On the rooftop, with the city lights glittering below, and a string quartet playing the piece I had once mentioned loving in passing. The ring he held out was a sapphire encircled by diamonds, not ostentatious, but enough to show the giver wasn't ordinary. There I was, lips trembling, tears threatening, as he said, "I've been through so much, but I've never seen anything as clear as us. Let me build this dream with you. For life." I nodded. In that moment, I believed I had won the lottery. My friend said it outright. "You're lucky," Kate, my best friend, commented after seeing the proposal photos. "Smart, beautiful, rich, and into business too? 1 in a million." But my mother was quiet for a long time when I called to tell her. She didn't say, "Congratulations," right away. She simply asked, "Are you sure he knows who you really are?" I didn't have an answer. And now, looking back, I wish I had taken that question more seriously. We married in mid-June on a radiant afternoon in Lake Forest, a suburb north of Chicago. Everything about the wedding looked like it had been lifted from a luxury bridal magazine. White chairs lining an aisle strewn with roses, violins playing as I walked in a simple satin gown that still made my mother cry. Ethan gripped my hand during the vows, eyes locked as if nothing else existed but me. I trusted those eyes. Trusted that the man in front of me would build something lasting and peaceful with me. After the wedding, we moved into a 3-story townhouse in Lincoln Park, a quiet neighborhood with green trees, less than a 10-minute drive from downtown. Most of the money for the house came from Ethan. He didn't say it outright at first. But a few weeks after moving in, during an argument about renovating the kitchen, he looked at me, half smiling, half mocking. "I figure if I put down all that money for this place, I should at least have a say in how the kitchen looks." I said nothing then. But inside, a tiny crack began to form. When I officially established Blue Horizon Media, Ethan seemed excited. He took me out to dinner, raised his glass, and said, "You'll make it." I saw that from the very first day. I still remember the warmth spreading through me at those words. I believed it was support. But weeks later, at a cocktail party hosted by one of his partners, I introduced myself to a woman managing a local brand, saying I had started my own agency. Ethan, standing beside me, immediately cut in. Blue Horizon? Her little side project. She helps cafes write Instagram captions. He chuckled. As if I were a charming accessory in his life, a creative flourish in his rigid financial world. I forced a polite smile. But inside something dimmed. Later at home I asked, "Do you really think my work is just for fun?" Ethan turned down the car radio, glanced at me and replied, "I was joking. Don't take everything so seriously. Everyone knows you're smart. But you also have to be realistic. It's a small agency, not Google." I turned toward the window. I didn't argue. I didn't want to ruin the night. But I started holding back the stories I once wanted to share. Before, whenever I signed a new client, I called Ethan right away, detailing every step. When the first client wired their deposit, I had danced around the kitchen, pulling him from his laptop to say, "Look, it's not an idea anymore. It's real." He smiled, placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Good job. But remember, there's still the mortgage, insurance, and my parents' dinner next week." I told myself not to dwell on it. But over time I stopped calling with good news. I started opening champagne alone. Or leaving it in the fridge until it went flat. Our friends, mostly from finance, law, or investment, often hosted house parties. Each time, Ethan liked to retell his life story. From his first year at Dartmouth to his first investment deal at 27. When I joined in, sharing an exciting marketing campaign I had run, he often cut me off. "You know why they picked her, right?" Ethan would turn to everyone, half joking, half serious. "Because Bethany has a knack for storytelling. The strategy part? Luckily, she's got someone at home to help." The whole room burst out laughing. I laughed along. But back in the bedroom after those parties, standing in front of the mirror wiping away smeared mascara, I wondered, why was it that every time I tried to prove myself he chose to put me down, even if just for fun? I thought of my mother, the woman who taught me to count every penny in the grocery store, who told me, "People doing big work can't afford to be careless." And I knew, the hurt was growing quietly inside me. Ethan no longer looked at me the way he did that first night, when I was in the hotel lobby corner, clutching a glass of water, speaking about my dreams. Now, in his eyes, I was the woman lucky enough to marry someone successful, living in the house he paid for, running a little project to stay busy. I still kept everything neat. Still cooked. Still planned vacations. Still smiled perfectly at parties. But inside I began to shrink. And I began to plan something Ethan would never ask about. My first breakthrough came on a September afternoon. A small software company I had been pursuing for months finally signed a contract. It wasn't life-changing money, but enough for me to hire 2 part-time employees and buy a professional printer for my tiny office. I brought the news home, thrilled as if I had crossed the finish line of a long race. That night I cooked Ethan's favorite barbecue, opened a bottle of red wine he called worth drinking, and handed him the contract. He glanced at it, set it down, and said something I would never forget. "Just luck. Probably the big firms were too busy, so they picked you." In his eyes, my months of effort were nothing but luck. I swallowed hard, forced a smile, but inside it felt like a hollow space opened wide. Not long after, I met Caroline. She was a friend of one of my new clients, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked brown hair tied neatly, bright eyes, and a warm voice. She had once been a financial advisor for an investment fund before starting her own firm. We were introduced at a business lunch. "You're young, your company is growing," she said, calm but firm. "You need to think beyond the current contract. The money you make today must feed tomorrow." I hesitated. Since childhood, I was used to saving every penny, but investing was another matter. Ethan handled most of our assets while I only managed daily expenses and company funds. Caroline studied me for a long moment, then said bluntly, "Men can be so confident they think they control everything. But I've seen too many women lose it all because they handed complete trust to their husbands. Don't let that happen to you." Her words pierced through the fog I had been wrapping around myself. Ethan had never asked what I did with profits, never once looked at the company accounts. To him, Blue Horizon was still a fun little project. And that very dismissal gave me room to breathe. I started working with Caroline. She showed me how to split profits into portions. One part reinvested in the company, one part in safe savings, and the rest divided into stocks and real estate. We began small, mid-tier tech stocks, municipal bonds, then the purchase of a 2-bedroom apartment in Logan Square, a neighborhood of aging buildings slowly changing as young people moved in. Caroline said, "You're not buying this to live in. You're buying it so that in 5 years when the neighborhood shifts, its value will double." I listened and followed. The first apartment quickly found tenants, bringing steady monthly income. I quietly signed the lease, quietly pocketed the keys and slipped them into my bag like a secret no one could know. From then on, I opened separate accounts. One bank for the company, another for personal investments. All documents, contracts, and receipts were carefully stored in a small safe at the office, a place Ethan had never set foot in because there's nothing worth seeing there. I kept driving the old sedan. I didn't change my wardrobe, didn't wear expensive jewelry. When Ethan asked, I always said, "The company's still getting by. Enough to cover salaries. The rest. I guess we're breaking even." He nodded, satisfied, never pressing further. Maybe because he liked believing he was the sole provider. But inside, I knew. Every contract, every saved dollar was becoming a brick in a house he would never step into. One evening, while Ethan was on a call in the living room, in the kitchen, I worked with my laptop open to spreadsheets. The numbers lined up. Dividends from investments, rental income, and last week's new contract. Altogether, more than I had ever dreamed of. I heard Ethan laughing loudly on the phone, bragging about the house he bought, the car he drove, the job he supported. I closed my laptop, stared into the glass reflection of my own face. And I thought, he never asks. Never asks why I stay up late. Never asks why I meet clients on weekends. Never asks why I always carry a slim folder even on vacations. His silence, his disregard, was my shield. Caroline once asked, "Do you plan to tell your husband about these investments?" I shook my head without hesitation. If he cared, he would have asked long ago. But now, this is mine. She smiled, her eyes half sympathetic, half proud. "Good. Keep it. One day you'll need it." And so, with every new contract, I quietly set aside a portion of profit into my separate accounts. Meanwhile, in a place he didn't know existed, another future was growing. Contract by contract, property by property, stock by stock. A future with no place for him. The changes in Ethan began so small I might have missed them if I hadn't paid attention. First, the watches. He once wore only one old Rolex his father gave him after finishing his MBA. Soon, his dresser turned into a display case. Omega, Patek Philippe, even Audemars Piguet. I asked, half joking, "Planning to open a store?" Ethan smirked, slipping off the latest purchase. "Men need a few pieces to show status. You wouldn't understand." Then came the cars. The silver sedan that once felt luxurious for us was replaced by a sleek black Maserati. Less than a year later, a Porsche joined it. I looked at the maintenance bills left on the table and sighed. He always excused it as image for work, ending with his usual line, "Without me, you wouldn't be living like this." I was used to nodding, smiling, turning away. But inside, the weight grew heavier. Ethan started coming home late. At first a few nights a week, then most nights. Sometimes he blamed client meetings, sometimes private clubs with partners. I asked, "Do you need me to prepare anything? Or should I come with you?" He laughed, pressed a quick kiss to my forehead. "You don't need to worry. These things are boring. Stay home, focus on your little business." The strange perfume appeared one October night. I wrapped my arms around him from behind as I always did when he came home late. But instantly the scent hit me, sweet, heady, unfamiliar. Not Ethan's usual cologne. I let go, pretending nothing. The next morning, gathering his shirts for laundry, I found the scent lingering on a collar. My heart raced, but reason screamed, "Don't jump to conclusions." Maybe it was from a restaurant's air freshener. Maybe from shaking someone's hand. I convinced myself. But deep down, a seed of doubt had taken root. Soon after, more signs appeared. Hotel bills on the credit card statement. Boutique hotels downtown. Places we had never stayed, certainly not for client meetings. Text messages flashing on his phone while he showered. A name saved with an initial followed by a red heart. The words simple, "Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" I held the phone, hands trembling. In the bathroom mirror, steam blurred Ethan's figure behind the glass. I could open it all, read every detail. But I set the phone back exactly where it had been. I was afraid. Not of the truth itself, but of the moment I'd have to admit to myself that the marriage I once trusted had already cracked. The real shock came on an afternoon that seemed ordinary. I was cleaning out Ethan's coat pocket to take it to the dry cleaners when a small receipt slipped out. Bartlett Jewelers. I looked at the number printed on the paper, $18,500. Item: diamond ring, custom order. My birthday had passed 3 months earlier. Our anniversary was still 6 months away. He had never hinted at or planned any kind of surprise gift. I held the paper, my heart pounding in my ears. Every excuse I had ever made for him crumbled in an instant. That night I didn't ask. Quietly, I took out my phone, snapped a picture of the receipt, and filed it into a folder I had started to keep track of oddities. That was the first time I officially gathered evidence. And after that, I began to see everything around me differently. Each time Ethan typed a message, I listened to the rhythm of his fingers on the keyboard. Each time he came home late, I noted the time and the excuse. I no longer rushed to believe his quick explanations. One late night, while Ethan slept soundly, I opened his laptop. No password. He had never thought I was curious or bold enough to check. His inbox appeared, cluttered with receipts from upscale restaurants, some familiar but others I had never set foot in. A few hotel booking confirmations, all on the days he claimed to be traveling for work. I bit my lip, steadying my trembling hands. I carefully selected, took screenshots of each, and sent them to a private email account Ethan knew nothing about. When I closed the laptop, I looked over at him, his face calm in sleep, breathing steady. The man who once knelt to propose on a New York rooftop now lay there, and I wasn't sure I knew who he was anymore. The next morning he woke up, picked up the coffee I had set out, and smiled as if nothing had happened. I have to leave early. Important meeting today. I looked at the new watch gleaming on his wrist, the heavy scent of perfume lingering on his jacket. I nodded, answering softly, "Drive safe." Inside I knew, I had begun a path with no way back. A path where evidence would be my weapon and my silence, the only armor keeping me steady. I didn't choose to confront him right away. The pain was clear, but rushing would only strip me of everything I had quietly built. I knew Ethan, he was used to winning, to overpowering, always believing that raising his hand was enough to claim victory. If I wanted to survive this battle, I had to be different. Quiet, patient, precise. I went to Angela, a divorce attorney specializing in complex cases, recommended by Caroline. She was in her 40s, shoulder-length brown hair, voice firm and steady. Her office on the 14th floor of a modest River North building wasn't flashy like the big firms, but it was tidy, discreet, and felt strangely safe. I handed her the folder: hotel bills, credit card statements, the diamond ring receipt, and a few saved emails. Angela flipped through each page, her eyes unwavering. "This is enough to prove infidelity," she said, then looked straight at me. "But not enough to protect your assets." "What do you mean?" Angela leaned forward. "You've built your own company, invested in real estate and stocks. I assume he doesn't know the full value." "Good," Angela emphasized. "Don't let him. We'll let him trap himself. He thinks you only have a small company, right?" I gave a thin smile. "He calls it my cute little project to stay busy." Angela closed the folder, placing both hands on the desk. "Keep that cover. Don't change cars, don't shop extravagantly. If you need to move out, rent a modest apartment, keep things simple. The more he believes you're dependent, the more careless he'll get. And in court, we'll let the numbers speak for you." I followed every instruction. When it was time to move out, I didn't rent a luxury downtown apartment, though I could easily afford it. Instead, I chose a one-bedroom in Logan Square, close to the office. Simple furnishings: a second-hand sofa, a small wooden dining table, beige curtains. My old silver sedan remained my daily car. Clothes? I stuck to basics: an old gray coat, worn heels, with only a few neat suits for work. To the outside world, I looked exactly like a woman pushed out of a wealthy marriage, struggling to keep a small business and her pride intact. To Ethan, it was proof he was right. One evening, while I was packing at the old house, he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking. "Without me, you're nothing. I'll take half that little business of yours." Call it payback for the years I supported you. I paused folding clothes, looked up at him but didn't argue. Yeah, maybe. He laughed loudly, convinced I had accepted the truth. In the weeks that followed, I trained myself in silence. When Ethan bragged to friends that he would wrap this divorce up quickly and take half the company's value, I stayed beside him, smiling politely, gripping my wine glass so tightly my fingers left red marks. When he sent taunting emails, I didn't respond. I forwarded them to Angela. Once he texted, I told you. Don't bother. You've got nothing but the house I bought and that little project I let you play with. I read it, then deleted it. But before I did, I saved a copy in the evidence folder. Angela called afterward. Don't let his words shake you. Let him keep thinking you're weak. Every word he says now is another blade he's driving into himself. I started living two parallel lives. By day, I was Bethany, the ordinary woman driving an old car, returning to a modest apartment, eating instant noodles when tired. But in the Blue Horizon office, I was someone else. Signing contracts worth hundreds of thousands with a coffee brand, expanding its chain, hiring new staff, opening a satellite office in another state. Profits climbed steadily, and Caroline helped me grow my investments further. No one but Angela and Caroline knew the whole truth. Each time I left the office, I carefully stepped into the role of the fragile one, pulling my worn gray coat close, walking out as if barely surviving another hard day. One night, while unpacking in the new apartment, Mom called. Her voice carried worry. Are you sure you're okay? I heard Ethan's about to file for divorce. I'm okay, Mom. In fact, better than you think. Maybe she heard something in my voice. The resolve she had taught me long ago, standing behind the counter of that old Ohio grocery store. Ethan thought I had lost. He believed he was about to take half of everything. But he didn't know. What he saw was only the shell. The truth I had hidden in places he'd never be patient enough to look. On the court day, the air in the room felt so thick it could be cut with a knife. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Angela, hands resting on neatly stacked files. My mind stretched taut, but on my face I kept calm. Across from me, Ethan leaned back, relaxed in a brand new navy suit, a Swiss watch gleaming on his wrist. He whispered and chuckled with his lawyer, a tall, salt-and-pepper-haired man known for winning favorable deals for wealthy husbands. Ethan looked as though this was nothing more than a light negotiation he had already won. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I drew a deep breath, reminding myself. This was the moment every silent preparation had been leading to. Ethan's lawyer spoke first. His voice boomed, dramatic, as if telling a tragic story. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Ethan Reynolds, dedicated his career and finances to support his wife, Mrs. Bethany Reynolds, in pursuing her dream. He bore the bulk of living expenses so she could have time to start a small company called Blue Horizon Media. Without his sacrifices, that company would not exist. Ethan straightened in his chair, glancing at me with a triumphant smirk. Angela rose, adjusting her glasses. Her voice wasn't loud but firm and clear. Your Honor, we have evidence showing that the opposing party's story is entirely inaccurate. She opened the folder and presented each piece of evidence. First, the emails. Ethan's own words projected on the courtroom screen. It's my wife's cute little project. As long as she's busy and not bothering me, it's fine. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I caught a flicker of color drain from Ethan's face, though he forced a weak smile. Angela continued. Here is a recording from a dinner party where Mr. Ethan himself interrupted his wife, calling her company a little project for fun. The voice is clear, recorded by another guest present. The audio played, laughter erupting, followed by Ethan's voice. Blue Horizon? That cute little project to keep my wife from getting bored. Angela didn't stop. She laid down a stack of color photos, hotel bills, and credit card statements. This is evidence of infidelity, showing that Mr. Ethan spent thousands of dollars on multiple extramarital relationships while still claiming he was the one providing for the family. The whispers grew louder. Ethan jerked up, his face flushed red. Lies. All doctored, fabricated. The judge struck the gavel. Silence in the courtroom. Angela lifted her head, her voice so steady it felt like I was standing behind a steel wall. And finally, Your Honor, we present the valuation report of Blue Horizon Media, along with the full investment portfolio legally under Mrs. Bethany's name. She raised the thick file, the bold figure flashing on the screen. $9,750,000. I looked at Ethan. His triumphant smile vanished as if wiped away by hand. His face drained of color, eyes wide, lips trembling. What? He stammered. The judge read the number aloud again, then asked, Mr. Reynolds, were you aware of these assets? She tricked me. She hid everything. Without me, she never would have had that money. The judge slammed the gavel, voice stern. Sit down. If you interrupt the court again, you will be removed and tried in absentia. Ethan trembled, still forcing his words through clenched teeth. She owes me. Half of that is mine. Angela replied calmly, No, Your Honor. All investments were made from the business profits of Blue Horizon. And as we've seen, my client built that company herself, without any financial contribution or professional input from her husband. In fact, we have a chain of evidence showing that he repeatedly belittled, dismissed, and even obstructed the company's growth. He gasped, eyes darting wildly, unable to settle on anything. His knuckles turned white, gripping the wooden table. Ethan was no longer the man who once charmed me at a gala. Before me was a man unraveling, clinging to the illusion that he owned someone else's life. The judge's final gavel fell, sharp and decisive like a line drawn in stone. After reviewing all records, evidence, and testimony, the court rules: Blue Horizon Media and the full personal investment portfolio of Mrs. Bethany Reynolds remain her sole and legal property. Ethan Reynolds has no claim to those assets. Regarding marital property, Mr. Reynolds will receive a fair division, including half the value of the townhouse and the remaining balance in the joint account. The court does not grant spousal support or alimony to either party, as both have stable incomes. This session is adjourned. The room fell into a beat of silence. I heard the secretary's pen scrape across the page, the creak of wooden benches as observers shifted. But all of it blurred because all I saw was Ethan's face. He stayed there, lips quivering, eyes wide and unblinking. Rage flushed his skin, but beneath it was panic, like a child stripped of a favorite toy. He leaned toward his lawyer, voice snarling, This can't be real. Do something. This is robbery. His lawyer lowered his head, gathering papers, his tone cold. I warned you. Her records are airtight. The judge left no room. Ethan shot to his feet, his chair crashing back, the echo cracking through the courtroom. She deceived me. He owes me. Half of that is mine. The judge hammered the gavel again, voice booming. Mr. Reynolds, sit down or I will order you escorted out immediately. But Ethan didn't sit. His face twisted, finger stabbing toward me as if trying to tear apart the calm I wore. All these years I supported you and now you turn your back? Traitor. A court officer approached, hand on his shoulder. Ethan yanked hard but was pulled away, his leather shoes stomping across the wooden floor. Angela placed her hand lightly on my arm, nodding. We've won. More importantly, you've protected yourself. News of the trial spread like wildfire. Within days, mutual friends and colleagues whispered in hallways, morning cafes and private chats. I heard Ethan lost everything in court. He thought he'd get half but ended up with nothing but a small share of marital assets. Unbelievable. I thought he was the one supporting the family. The reputation Ethan once prized, that of a successful, confident, charming man, began to fracture. One afternoon I received a text from Kate, an old friend. Beth, did you know Ethan was dropped from the firm's partner list? They don't want ties to someone exposed so publicly in court. I read it slowly, my heartbeat calm. Not triumph, but the quiet recognition of consequences long sown by his choices. A few days later, as I left the office, I ran into one of Ethan's former colleagues. He stepped closer, eyes full of pity. Bethany, I want you to know, everyone sees the truth now. No one believes his bragging anymore. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. I really am fine. Driving back to my modest apartment, I reflected. Ethan once believed he was the center of everything. Work, family, our marriage. But in the end, it was that arrogance that cost him it all. After court, I thought I'd feel instant relief. But reality was different. Even with Ethan gone, his shadow lingered. In dreams, in mornings when my heart raced awake. I realized that legal victory doesn't equal healing. I began therapy with Marjorie, a woman in her 50s with warm but piercing eyes. In her small office, decorated with a painting of lavender, she often began sessions with a simple question: "How does your body feel today?" At first I hesitated. I wasn't used to speaking in feelings, only in figures and tasks. But slowly I learned to notice small things: tension in my shoulders, worry curling in my stomach, or rare moments when my breath flowed freely without catching. One day I admitted, "I'm afraid Ethan can still pull me back, not by actions but by the voice he used to belittle me. It echoes in my head even though I know he has no power anymore." Marjorie smiled, handing me a handwritten card. "You are not the voice of someone else's past. You are your own story." I kept that card in my wallet, a reminder. While I learned to heal, Blue Horizon Media entered a phase of powerful growth. Major clients sought us out, eager to work with a team both creative and resilient. I hired more staff, opened branches in New York, then Los Angeles. But a void still remained. I didn't want success for myself alone. I wanted the pain to mean something for others. The idea of the Empower Her Fund was born one night as I worked late at the office, gazing at Chicago's skyline. On a blank page I wrote, "Support women leaving toxic relationships. Start businesses. Gain financial freedom." When I shared the plan with Caroline and Angela, silence filled the room before Caroline smiled, placing her hand on the table. "Beth, this is the legacy you're building." The Empower Her Fund launched 6 months later. Its first program focused on teaching financial basics to women leaving divorce or abusive relationships. I led a few sessions myself, sharing lessons from the days I stayed behind my mother's grocery counter. A young woman in her 20s shyly raised her hand. "Bethany, how do I know I'm brave enough to leave when I have nothing?" You don't need everything at once. Just start small. One account of your own. One new skill. One person who believes in you. And if you haven't found anyone yet, let me be that person. Months later, Empower Her became home to countless stories. A middle-aged woman, after 30 years in a controlling marriage, used her startup grant to open a small bakery. On opening day, she hugged me tight, tears wetting my shoulder. "If not for this fund, I'd still think I was too old, too late to start. You showed me it's never too late." Another participant, Emily, spoke at graduation, her voice trembling but strong. "You gave me the courage to leave an abusive marriage. Not with money but with your presence. If you could do it, I can too." The hall fell silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. I listening, feeling something deeper than success. Connection, trust, strength born from pain transformed. Once I returned to Ohio, to the little town where I grew up. My mother, hair now silver, sat in our old grocery store. She looked at me smiling. "My daughter, you're not only building wealth for yourself. You're giving it to those who thought they'd never have a chance." I held her hand as the shop bell chimed, a customer walking in. It reminded me of my beginning. This store, my parents' worn hands, lessons of discipline and saving. Now I carried those lessons not for me but for hundreds of women. One late autumn afternoon in Chicago, leaving a startup seminar, I saw Ethan by chance. Near the train station, he lingered with his hands buried in the pockets of a worn coat, eyes vacant as if searching for something long gone. I barely recognized him. The man once clad in sharp suits and polished watches now looked gaunt, unshaven. The glow of his past was gone, leaving only weariness. He noticed me pausing. His eyes flickered, surprise then confusion. Finally his voice rasped, "Bethany, I never knew you were this strong." In memory, Ethan was once the man who walked into rooms with a smile that drew admiration. Now he was there, a lost soul. I gave a faint, calm smile, like closing a book already finished. "You never wanted to know." He opened his mouth as if to say more but closed it. He lowered his head, pulled his hands from his pockets and walked slowly toward the station. His figure blended into the crowd until it disappeared. I stood for a moment, the cold wind threading through my hair, then turned toward a different direction. No wound left to reopen. Months later, I was in New York for Blue Horizon Media's new office opening. The glass tower on Madison Avenue became our headquarters. Inside, light filled the space, desks buzzing with energy, laughter echoing in collaborative corners. That evening, after a long day of meetings and introductions, I entered my private office alone. The glass wall opened onto New York's skyline, skyscrapers reflecting the golden sunset like shards of a giant mirror. I stepped closer, resting my hand on the window frame. My reflection merged with the city's lights, my eyes catching the glow, steady, persistent, alive. In that moment, I wasn't thinking of Ethan or the lost years. I thought of the road ahead. The women empower her would reach, the dreams waiting to be revived, and myself, finally free, finally heard. A strange calm spread through me, not pride, but the peace of someone who had survived the storm and still rose tall. The city lights shimmered back, whispering, I had become my own symbol. And this time no one could take it away. Perhaps you, listening now, feel something of your own. Maybe this story is a warning. Maybe you see yourself in years once spent holding together a fragile family. What I've learned is this: true strength isn't about how much money or property we have. It's about facing truth and choosing to rise. Freedom often begins when we no longer need anyone else's approval. And you, what about you? If it were your life, what would you do when the person who once held your hand down the aisle was the one who belittled and betrayed you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the hope someone out there is waiting to hear. And if you want to keep walking with me through stories of families, of lives that look ordinary yet carry storms within, follow this channel so you won't miss what's next. Each story isn't only a tale but a mirror, a reminder that strength and hope are always there, even in the darkest hours.